So our next speaker, I'm very excited about. Steve Cook he'll bring a different perspective because he has a background across marketing. He has a business called FortuneCMO.co, where he serves as a marketing executive for multiple companies, and he's a contributing editor to CMO.com. So not just research, but all aspects of marketing, but including research, are the things that he talks about, the things that he thinks about. And he's going to come up and he's going to give a talk called Moving from Now to Next in the Marketing of Insights. Steve?
Thanks, Dana. You guys ready to get on the highway? Compliment to Dana, it's amazing. Lucy and Padmini, we didn't see each other's presentations, but you're going to see an incredible flow here and a lot of consistency with different graphics, but same idea. So this is the topic that you saw in the brochure, and we all know that the business world, the marketing world, has been going through seismic, disruptive transformations for the last 10 years because of digital, social, and now new technologies like virtual reality that are dramatically changing the way we go to market, the way we get insights, and these are exciting times. I'm loving it. I have 3 goals for you today. The first one is, and I think we can tick this box, you guys already know that the way you market yourselves, and I love what Padmini said, matter. What do you stand for is very important. So you want to get from now to next. That's why you're here. What I hope to do, along with the other presenters, is give you ammunition to go back to your teams with a compelling presentation to help them understand why this is mission critical to move forward. I hope you learned something. I hope I make you uncomfortable, not in a negative way, but I hope I create some dissonance, but I also hope we have some fun in the next 30 minutes. And I'm going to move fast, and you're going to see some charts with a lot of words. The reason for it is we did some research, and I wanted you to have the presentation. We're not going to release this research. It's all on the presentation here. I also want to have a conversation. I don't want to be a presenter. I want to have a conversation with you. So please interrupt me. We've got microphones. Stop me at any point. You will not hurt my feelings. Who am I? I started my career at Procter & Gamble. I worked in P&G first in global headquarters in Cincinnati. Then I worked in London, ran CoverGirl and Noxium and Max Factor across Europe, came back to the US, was recruited to Coca-Cola. I was in brand marketing, started the first global innovation department, worked on business development, and some secret things I can't tell you about. Then I was the chief marketing officer for Samsung for North America, across all product lines, B2C and B2B. That's my foundation. So I'm not a market researcher. I was the client. And I didn't know what Green Book was until just recently. But because I would go to my market research teams. I would meet with the vendors, but I wasn't the hirer. So to some respects, I'm your surrogate. I mean, I want you guys to have enough brand awareness and enough matter that the CMO says, I want you to hire these guys. Because I know what they do and I know they're going to help us. So that's my foundation. And Fortune CMO, as Dana said, I'm an outsourced chief marketing officer. I work with Fortune 500 companies today that may have a CMO, but they've got issues and they need, somebody to come onto the field to play a ball. I also work with a venture capital firm in Palo Alto, Forte Ventures, and Champion Capital Group, which is a private equity firm in New York and Tel Aviv. That's what I do today, and I work in Silicon Valley. I work in Silicon Beach, which is LA, Santa Monica. Atlanta is quickly becoming the Silicon South, and again, I'm working with Startup Nation, which is Israel, quite a few startups there. So this is my perspective. And so we did a survey, which was kind of interesting to do a survey for the market research community, but we wanted to understand what was on your mind and what you thought about how your company was going to market today. And what we wanted to determine was, do you think you're white bread, generic? I think we heard that from some of the other speakers. Or are you using technology? Are you enabling yourself? Are you doing things different? How do you matter? And then I've got a formula here. This is a recipe. Are there other things that could go into the recipe? Absolutely. But there are 4 areas that I want to talk to you about to hopefully inspire you and dive even deeper. So I'm going to share some of what I have learned about working with startups, storytelling, which we've seen as a consistent theme already, and you're going to hear more of that today. Then we're going to talk about commodity versus brand, and then Lovemark, which Lucy, who was here last year? Raise your hand. Okay, so last year you guys heard Lucy talk about Lovemark, which is a Saatchi & Saatchi concept that I fully embrace. And I think this recipe will help you become a unicorn. Does anybody know what a unicorn is in the startup world? This is what VCs call startups that are, have high valuations because they're rare. So I'm going to help you hopefully become a unicorn in your industry. So we did a survey. 24 of you took it. We had 26% out of the 91 people here. And I want to thank Dana for collaborating with me on this, and also ATYM. If you're not familiar with them, they're an incredible resource. So we did the survey. Again, we had 26% response rate, which is qualitative. This is directional. Do not view this as directional. I mean, as quantitative, it's directional. But we had that's from the supplier community. From the client community, we've got 4 clients here. So we had 100% response rate there. And again, we wanted to find out what you thought, not what I thought. So first off, we asked, what industries do you work in? And we've got plenty of diversity here. So this is not a survey from people who just work in healthcare. We've got plenty of coverage here across diverse industries. We also asked the question, how do you engage your clients and your prospects? Again, a lot of diversity here. Should there be more in digital and social and podcasting? Maybe. Depends what your strategy is. Now, this is interesting. We asked the question, how would you rate your firm's marketing? We got a lot of answers in the middle ground, 4 to 7 rating, and a lot in the bottom tertile. I think that speaks volumes. You're at a tipping point. This industry's at a tipping point. Again, you guys have taken it upon yourself to come here to get to an 8, 9, or a 10 for your company, so I applaud you. But the industry, as you see it, is kind of in no man's land. It's not a good place to be. I'm going to be quiet, read these. I wanted you to read what your peers have said about why they answered the question that way. Okay? Read this as well. That last answer, I was really happy to see that, and this questionnaire was anonymous, so I'm not going to ask the person to raise their hand, but they hit the nail on the head. Again, we've heard it from the first 2 speakers. How are you different? How do you matter? What's your strategy? Right? How are you going to, who do you want to reach? How are you going to reach them? Critically important. This is also sobering, and I ask you the question, is this where you want your company to be? And is this where you think the industry should be? Only 42% claimed that their company had a brand positioning statement. That's dangerous. It's frightening. Think of the exercises Padmini talked about. Not enough of you are spending time figuring out who you are, why you matter, and then communicating that. A lot of the answers that we got when we asked the why questions, we got a lot of functional responses on that were basically cost of entry value points. Again, this is a lot of the what that Padmini talked about. These are table stakes. You're not going to engage anybody. You're going to default to a transactional relationship, and I loosely use that word relationship. You're going to be forced to reduce your pricing, reduce your margin, okay? And you're going to be fighting job to job. Again, you do not want to be in the commodity space. I like to ask why a number of different ways. So asking what's different about your firm, again, a lot of cost of entry value points. Not a good place to be. Another way to ask, what's better? I mean, somebody actually said nothing. That was their answer, nothing. It's probably similar. All right? How are you special? When I was at Coca-Cola, we were always asking ourselves the question for everything we did, whether it was packaging, naming, flavors, promotions, how is this different, better, and special than what we've done before and what our competition is going to be doing? How is it different, better, and special? The good news is a number of people that responded are starting to innovate. That's great. I went to IIEX in Atlanta 3 months ago. How many of you were there? Did you find it as amazing as I did? It was so inspiring. There's so many new enabling opportunities out there, least of which is your mobile phone and your consumer's mobile phone, but virtual reality. So a number of you are starting to figure out, how do we make ourselves matter more? And so you're starting to rock. I mean, this was all very, very good insights to start to see on what a number of you are doing. But my executive summary, I'm not using any numbers here, but my assessment, I humbly say this, I want your validation on this, is I think there's a lot of commodity communication right now. Again, not a good place to be, but that's why you're here. But a number of you are starting to use differentiated technology, differentiated approaches to matter more to your clients. Now, speaking of clients, we've got 4 clients here. You're going to see them on a panel, I think, in about an hour. This is kind of obvious, but we needed to get it. Your clients, your prospects, they said it's very important that we understand what's different, better, and special from the people that we're either working with or that are approaching us. That's kind of obvious. But look at that. One person gave me a verbatim, and this is, I'll take this on, as positively as I can, but they answered, I want to know why I should give them time versus the others that contact me. The people you're reaching out to are very, very busy, very busy. Why should they take your phone call? Why should they take your meeting? Read these. Anybody ever see Apollo 11 with Tom Hanks? Houston, we have a problem. This is, again, 4 people, but I think this is symptomatic of where the industry is right now. Again, you're at a tipping point. You guys are here to win, to lead your industry, and you'll hear more from the clients in the panel shortly. But again, for those of you who were here, or if you go on to Dana's site, you'll see the videotape from the client panel from last year. And we heard this. We saw this. And by the way, they want you to win. They want interesting conversations with you. And for some suppliers, the one that answered the last question, or client, they saw a supplier do something different, using improvisation to get insights from a consumer. Who would have thought? I thought that was pretty interesting. How many of you know Lenny Murphy, editor-in-chief of Green Book, Dana's partner? At IIEX in Atlanta, I wrote a story for CMO.com. And by the way, I didn't explain that. So it's CMO.com. CMO.com is the content marketing platform owned by Adobe. And I'm their resident CMO. So one of the things I do more for learning and staying on top of all the changes that are happening in the marketing world, I talk to thought leaders across the marketing community. And Lenny is a significant thought leader. He organized the IIEX conference. But I wrote a story. When you get this, the URL is on the bottom there. But Lenny said, the pace of change is only going to increase. So there's no more standing still in any piece of the market research business. He calls it like it is. Lenny also said, increasingly, we're capturing consumer data on how to engage. understand and activate customer relationships in the customer life cycle via the customer's digital exhaust, which I found a fascinating phrase that I'd never thought about before. But you think about what we all leave behind on a daily basis from our smartphone. He calls it our exoskeleton. And so the mobile phone of your consumers is generating insights that prior techniques may have, but now you can get it in real time. Lenny also talked, and a lot of people talked about this at IIEX, that there are new players in the market research community. Google is a competitor for many of you, but they also could be a partner. They also could be a customer. But the digital and social media world is generating insights on consumers that you've gotten with other techniques, and you need to reckon that. How many of you know Kristen Schweizer from Beacon Research? A number of you. She's a leader in your industry on the qualitative side. She and I were brand managers at Procter & Gamble together, and she was also interviewed in this story. She talked extensively about mobile. She and a lot of other qualitative researchers are now using mobile to capture insights in the moment without having to put people in the field. And she also talked a lot about visualizing learning and storytelling, and she and a lot of her colleagues do their research summaries when they're presenting back to their clients with storytelling, and she said it's working wonders. So again, this whole notion of using storytelling as opposed to presenting numbers or even just statements, tell it in a story. It's the way we're wired. We remember stories better than anything else. So now I want to take you to the recipe. If the majority of the industry is at a commodity state with innovation starting to happen, how do we get to next? Again, this is my recipe. There are many other ingredients. You're going to hear them throughout the day. But these are my 4, so let's work our way through this. So I work with a lot of startups. There's a lot to be learned, good and bad, in working with startups and being at a startup. Who's familiar with Guy Kawasaki? Good. Do you like him? Is he inspirational? He worked at Apple. He was an evangelist at Apple. Now I think he teaches at Berkeley, but he's a guru on startups. Read this book. It's a fast read, and it's very insightful. One of the things that he wrote about in this book is how to do the perfect pitch with investors or with recruiting new talent or even partners and prospects. And one of the things that I've experienced, and it's been fascinating learning for me, but also painful in some respects, a lot of times when you're presenting to a VC, you may only get 3 to 5 minutes. 3 to 5 minutes to present a business model and why you matter and how you're different. So I think there's learning that can be extrapolated from what Guy has written and 8 of the 10 slides that he thinks are very important, and I do as well. So I put these in yellow boxes. I'm not going to read the detail, but you've got to articulate the problem that you're solving. I think, again, ties back to what Padmini and Lucy said. Why do you matter? What problems are you solving? Your value proposition. Again, why do you matter? How are you solving? What's your only? Again, I'm going to steal from you because I thought you really summarized it well. What's your magic? What did Lucy say? What's your secret sauce? What is your magic? And if you can't answer that, you're a commodity. And you're not going to be making the revenue and the margin that you deserve. I also think communicating your business model so that people understand not only how you're different and how you do it, but it's, how can you work with them? How can your business model and your how work with their problems and issues? You also may want to communicate how you go to market. That may be part of your only. And I would also be prepared to communicate how you're different versus alternative solutions that are also going to be responding to an RFP. And then your management team. Again, thank you, Padmini. People, especially in the service industry. It's all about people. Yeah, you can have IP, you can have technique, you may have some other proprietary things, but at the end of the day, it comes down to people. By the way, I always thought it did in the corporate world as well, but in the service industry, even more so. Once you figure all of that out, you've got to tell your story. But you first have to understand, what is our story, right? Again, I come back to the numbers we looked at before. From the 26% response rate that we got, only 46% of the respondents said that their company had a brand positioning statement. Okay? Another story that I did about 1.5 years ago with a gentleman named Ed Saxton. You won't know him, but you'll know his movies. Ed is an 8-time Oscar-winning producer in Los Angeles. He's a friend of mine. And he's been nominated 22 times for Oscars. He did Silence of the Lambs, Philadelphia, Married to the Mob, and a lot of other movies. So he knows how to tell stories. Actually started his career as a VJ on MTV in the early days when rock and roll bands were telling stories with videos. He's kind of gone full circle. So he's a Hollywood player, and he's still producing. He's actually up to, don't tell anybody I told you this, he's up to be the producer for the show Ray Donovan. You guys familiar with that? It's a hot show. I don't watch it, but it's a pretty hot show. So he knows how to tell stories. He knows how to make revenue from storytelling. So I interviewed him. Again, the URL is on the previous page if you're interested, but a couple of quotes that he said that I thought would be relevant to talk about here. I'm going to read these. What I love about stories is that they are big conduits and emotional pipes into people, so they inspire empathy. What did we hear about empathy before? Thank you, Padmini. They change behavior, and they draw us closer around a common campfire. We unite around stories. Stories are at the center of our identity. As a filmmaker or a brand builder, you have to create a stronger emotional pull for customers to part with their money more than the emotional pull that makes them want to keep their money. He has a wonderful quote from Maya Angelou, previous poet laureate of the United States. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Again, think of the relationships that you've built, the magnetic relationships you've built with clients. It goes beyond respect and admiration. I mean, you want them to win, and they know you want them to win. They can see it in your passion. He's got a perspective not only on the film business, but communication in general. And by the way, he works with USC. His sister is a medical doctor working with all kinds of new technology. Ed has done work with virtual reality and a lot of other new technologies. He's a real geek. But he says now, because there are so many competing messages bombarding us, and because people expect empathy from brands and expect brands to be as relevant to them as the people they interact with, it is a necessity for brands to engage, visualize, communicate, and connect with compelling brand stories. This becomes an integral part of brand identity, and I would argue, and I'm going to give you an example, this is just as important for a B2B business model as it is for a B2C business model. In today's fast-moving digital world, where we all have 1-second attention spans, and we are changing channels faster than we ever have, people will cut you off after just a few seconds. How many of you saw the research, came out about 3 months ago, that human beings have a shorter attention span than goldfish? Remember saying that? Somebody's done the research. I mean, I didn't think it was a Facebook, meme. Somebody did research on it. That's scary, and we're all distracted. We all are being bombarded with information. So your story has to be crisp, clean, compelling, engaging, visual. Speaking of visual, in a digital age, we are much more visual storytellers and story consumers because everyone relates to everyone else on a screen. I had never met Lucy before, but I saw her talk, And we connected on LinkedIn, and I went up and introduced myself this morning. I saw Lucy on a screen before I saw her in person. And so you've got to be able to tell your story even on a small screen. Your visual identity is your brand story. So as market research suppliers, think about all the platforms that you can use to tell your story. This is what B2C brands are using. I think this is an opportunity for you as well. And I am always engaged when I see a supplier and their client telling the stories together. That's very powerful. Get your clients who want to go public with certain parts of what they've done to tell the story with you. Now, this is the example I wanted to use. How many of you are familiar with Salesforce.com? The majority of you. How many of you are familiar with Dreamforce? Okay. This happened to be last week, and I watched about half of it in between developing the presentation. Salesforce is a B2B platform, and they've been on an aggressive acquisition tear. I don't know when they started Dreamforce, and they do it around the world. There's a EMEA version and an Asia version. What they do is they get their clients, their customers, who they consider partners and part of the family, to tell their stories about how they used Salesforce products. They don't show products. There are no product presentations. Everything is done from a user's perspective, and they tell stories, and it's all live streamed. So they're using technology, not surprising. But I think this is a wonderful business-to-business example for a product and a service provider that maybe not a sole practitioner in research could use, but I would say mid-size or larger. Look at what these guys do. Look at what Adobe does for the Adobe Summit, and I'm sure there are other examples. Tell stories, and tell them on a digital platform that doesn't require somebody to travel or pay money. Make it available 24/7 online. All right, this is an interactive part of this discussion. Who can tell me, we've got two mics here, who can tell me what's different between the brand on the left and the brand on the right? We've got somebody raising their hand back there. What's different? Whoa, hang on. What's different?
The brand on the left thinks it's in the coffee business, and the brand on the right thinks it's in an experiential business.
We're done. You nailed it. Exactly. If you read Howard Schultz's book, which came out about 10 years ago about Starbucks, he got the idea. He was selling barista professional equipment and going to Italy and buying and sourcing the equipment and coming back and selling it to mom and pop coffee shops. And if you've been to Italy or Spain or most European countries, you'll notice that the coffee shop is where the community gathers throughout the day. It's their campfire, and that's where people bond. And he realized we had nothing like that in America. You could go into Woolworths 30 years ago and buy a 5-cent cup of coffee, and it tasted horrible, or make freeze-dried coffee at home. But he realized we did not have the experience. So he is selling an experience, not just product. And he's done a lot of other things to create a brand versus a commodity. And I use this as a reference. Again, think about what we saw in the survey, about what you guys said. You've got to get from the coffee bean and selling commodity points of difference to selling an experience. Who's familiar with Love Marks and Kevin Roberts? Again, for those who were here last year, Lucy talked about this in her keynote, and I give this book to every one of my clients when we're developing the brief and getting them. I make this mandatory reading, which is kind of a strange thing for a supplier to say to a client, but I have them read this. This is a concept that Kevin Roberts developed with his colleagues at Saatchi & Saatchi. This is how Saatchi & Saatchi has differentiated what they do. This is their secret sauce. And it's a great book, fast read. You can read it flying across country. You owe yourself. Get it for yourself and for your teams. Here's the essence of it. His thesis, which I believe is more than a thesis, is that we had the age of branding. I mean, think about J. Walter Thompson, one of the innovators and leaders in the advertising business. They helped the world create brands, to go from commodities to brands. The age of branding lasted about 90 years. We still have brands. People are still going to use branding. But his point is we've got to go beyond branding. We've got to figure out how to create a love mark. A love mark is a thing. It can be a product. It can be a service. It can be both, where the person that is buying it, consuming it, not only has high respect, but has high love that goes beyond any rational explanation. And we're going to look at some brands in a minute. Here's why love marks are important. On the left, think about the 80 years of branding. What was that all about? I mean, if you step back for a second, and it's really, think about it. What was brand building all about? It was about getting somebody's attention. It was about breaking through. Think about the metrics that we use in the marketing world, reach and frequency. It's about breaking through and interrupting, right? And informing, and one-to-many, broadcast, right? Yes, we still have that. That's still important, but we are transitioning out of that age with empowered consumers on digital. Consumers don't even, they're skipping advertising. They'll go to the net and they'll find out what they need to know and they'll read peer reviews. You need to attract them. I would argue for a B2B company, you also have to attract. You've got to be discovered for what you're different for. And it's a very, very different mindset, and the strategies and the tactics you use are very, very different. These are some of the differences between what a brand is and what a love mark is. Again, I go back to Lucy and Padmini and thank them so much because this is what they were talking about.